Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. WTF in the UK as RBS slaughters SMEs and then robs their still warm corpses? Meanwhile, in Geneva, the P5+1 talks have resulted in Iran being forbidden from trading its OIL for GOLD. And in the PRC, the S has hit the F for the dollar on the SHFE, and the PBOC has thrown a whole bunch of STFU at the US Treasuries. Tell me more, STACY, Stacy.
Max, we're going to cover all those in our headlines today. First, RBS kills off good firms for profit. Royal Bank of Scotland, you know, the taxpayer-owned bank, is killing off small businesses to seize assets for its own property empire, according to evidence referred to financial watchdogs by Vince Cable, the business secretary. In particular, this unit of Royal Bank of Scotland called Global Restructuring Group, GRG, basically drove small and medium enterprises into bankruptcy, into administration, in order for RBS's unit called West Register, their property division, to seize their property at knockdown prices.
Yeah, really. I mean, we've been talking about what's been going on here in the UK for a while. And here you have RBS, which is now a government-owned bank. So it's the government. So, for example, we've got a couple here, Eddie and Cheryl Warren in Portsmouth. They have been subjected to treasonous activity by their own government because the government owns RBS. And here's a smoking gun, as the Sunday Times point out, that when this couple bought this hotel in Portsmouth, a condition of the loan was that they had to take out an interest rate swap. And as we've covered on this show before, this is a weapon of mass financial destruction. Interest rate swaps blow up in your face like an improvised exploding roadside device in Afghanistan if interest rates go down. And interest rates are guaranteed to go down because the Bank of England brings in quantitative easing, or Mark Carney brings in forward guidance to keep interest rates down. So RBS sold an interest rate swap, which added £500,000 to the debt, which then the property was assayed by RBS's own property assayers at an artificially low price, £2 million below what it was actually worth. Then they stole the property from Eddie and Cheryl Warren, had this hotel stolen from them, from Cameron, Osborne, and RBS. This is financial terrorism. This couple might as well have been in Afghanistan and had their heads blown off or chopped off in Saudi Arabia for Cameron, Osborne, and RBS doing to them what they say they're fighting against in these foreign countries. It's absolutely amazing. These poor people are the victims of financial terrorism right here in the UK. And Osborne and Cameron are there with the little pasties on their nipples, swinging in the go-go clubs, doing the pole dancing. Yeah, buy to let, buy to let. Meanwhile, they're killing British people. They've gotten divorced. Their lives are shambles because they're terrorists.
Well, you know, this is something that should not actually be a surprise because we've seen it over and over and over. We saw it used against Greece. We saw it used against Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, the same sort of thing. The techniques were the same. Basically, there were a number of different things, jacking up rates, interest rates suddenly, or imposing fines on your customer, or suddenly changing the valuation of their assets. So this happened to Lehman Brothers. It happened to AIG, where suddenly loans were called in. So these things pulled out the rug from under those companies, and their assets were also seized for pennies on the dollar, Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers.
And the government says we need GCHQ to spy on people. The government is in league with the NSA in America, again, another highly treasonous act to spy on people because they say they want to stop the bad guys. And yet here are the Warrens down in Portsmouth who had their property stolen using an exploding financial device concocted by RBS in the bowels of their terrorist organization. So isn't that duplicitous by the government, Stacy? Isn't that a lie by Cameron and Osborne when they say they're fighting terrorists and that they subject their own citizens to this type of terrorism? Isn't that a duplicitous, treasonous government?
I don't believe in treason so much because I don't believe in nation states or whatever. It's a globalized world, and there should be rules, there should be regulations on the football field of this game. There are bigger knock-on consequences that are more important, as they point out in this piece about RBS, and that is that by driving healthy companies into the ground, RBS has not only ruined thousands of lives, it has also gravely hindered our economic recovery, compounding the misery of millions of hard-working Britons. So again, here we are, on the one hand, they're going to say, well, we've made a profit on RBS. So you, the taxpayer who owns 82% of this bank, you should be happy. But it's taken the destruction of millions of jobs because we've destroyed these SMEs and taken their assets and given them to a handful of the elite who are now billionaires thanks to our small profit on RBS.
Right, so it's a wealth transference scheme, and millions of people who are missold these credit default swaps have had their net worths transferred to the kleptocrats down there in Westminster.
Well, speaking of SMEs, we have the small and medium-sized economies of the UK and the US, particularly the US, really in the news in these next headlines. These didn't get much attention because so much other stuff was happening in the international news, but China's planned crude oil futures may be priced in yuan, SHFE. This is a Shanghai futures exchange, and China, which overtook the United States as the world's top oil importer in September, hopes the contract will become a benchmark in Asia and has said it would allow foreign investors to trade in the contract without setting up a local subsidiary. So of course this is going to increase not only demand for the yuan and makes it an international reserve currency, but remember, they're talking about a benchmark. They want a different benchmark because all of our benchmarks are run by the likes of RBS who are constantly manipulating things, scalping everybody, their customers, their clients, everybody. So maybe they want just a more honest system over there. Has nothing to do with treason or anything. It just has to do with wanting a free market that is unmanipulated and it's a fair level playing field.
So by trading against an index and having that index manipulated, whether it's a forex type of index or a libor index or a energy index, you can create conditions to scalp the global economy the same way that RBS is scalping local British people of their hard-earned money. So the local regulatory environment here in the UK allows for British bankers to scalp the global economy. So China is saying, we don't want to have that money stolen from us. We'd rather keep it than not have it stolen.
Yes, and they want an honest benchmark rate. So the other important thing, of course, is, as I said, China has displaced the U.S. as the world's largest importer of oil in September. So we're emerging into this new world where the U.S. no longer is able to dictate global benchmark rates or what an oil or commodity is priced in. And I speak to Chen Bo, who is a Chinese, works at the Chinese trading firm Unipec, and he says, the yuan has become more international and more recognized by the financial market. I don't think it would be unacceptable for the world to use the renminbi for commodities trading. Now, of course, this is part of how America gets so much power and gets basically free commodities and goods sent to them because they have the reserve currency of the dollar priced. All of the commodities in the world are priced in it. So here he's saying that maybe commodities could be priced in renminbi.
Yeah, the only way that America can continue the illusion of having a superpower is to continue to print trillions and trillions more dollars to use to acquire as many assets overseas as possible until these foreign governments simply renege and they say, we don't want you to steal our property any longer.
Well, moving on from there to the U.S. dollar and whether or not it could be displaced by the renminbi. Now, these talks in Geneva this past weekend, the P5+1 talks, had a historic breakthrough. And the thing that was so breakthrough about it was that the U.S. was actually speaking to Iran because this is so politically unacceptable in America. But the talks did happen and they were a success. Iran agrees to deal with powers to curb nuclear work. Now, the important thing of what might have brought America to the table is a paragraph I found in this article saying, some curbs on gold trading will also be removed. While Iran will be allowed to buy and sell precious metals, including gold, it will be barred from accepting them as payment for oil or any other sanctioned transaction. According to the officials, Iran sits on the world's fourth largest proven oil reserves. So, we know that imports to Turkey, for example, of gold has been record. There's huge quantities of gold going to Turkey. So was this Iran selling their oil for that gold? Was this a part of that whole deal? And maybe the U.S. didn't want gold being traded for oil.
Well, I think what we're seeing here is that the world works on a stealth gold exchange, gold standard. It's a stealth gold standard because it's not formally recognized. But here you have, as you point out, the entire geopolitical situation in the Middle East with Iran now doing a deal, thanks to John Kerry, Secretary of State, and the other people of that committee, are engaged in gold economics, gold-backed political maneuvers. So this is a gold standard around the world. It's just not recognized as a gold standard. And so what we are waiting for is for the world to formally recognize gold as the reserve of the world. We're just waiting for that because it will happen.
Well, many are looking at this from the opposite side. They're saying that Iran is the one that capitulated, and they were like, oh my God, you know, American sanctions have destroyed us, we need to deal. Is it the other way around, however, that America was saying, oh my God, they're dealing oil and gold, we must come to the table and deal? So it's a different way of looking at it. And then finally, another story that happened at the same time was this. PBOC says no longer in China's interest to increase reserves. The People's Bank of China said, it is no longer in China's favor to accumulate foreign exchange reserves, Yi Gang, a deputy governor of the central bank, said in a speech organized by China Economists 50 Forum at Tsinghua University. He added that the yuan's appreciation is actually perhaps helping more Chinese than it's harming them, i.e. the middle class is able to, their purchasing power rises as the yuan rises.
All right, so you're laying out a geopolitical situation here where Iran was calling the shots more than people are recognizing because they were trading oil for gold.
That's a possibility if you look at this as I have, with the gold being traded for oil.
All right, so that was what forced this accord. And it's stirring the pot in the region because, of course, it sets up Saudi Arabia and Israel and Iran and the US and the UK are all having to rearrange their seats at the table, but based on Iran using the gold card. Now, here you have China, which is also exerting some leverage by exerting some other levers in the global economy that are not recognized by the West, as it were, and yet you see these subtle shifts taking place.
Well, exactly, because everybody said that we're on a petrodollar standard. You talked to Jim Rickards, he talked about this region as a currency war as well, and the petrodollar in particular. But first of all, if Saudi Arabia doesn't have the oil it says, and remember those WikiLeaks cables showed that they have 40% less than what they're claiming officially. And
oh, okay, so you're saying here that, again, another element unreported or unrecognized is that Saudi Arabia, and we were in that region doing a film not too long ago, and the word on the street, on the Arab street, was that Saudi Arabia was overstating their reserves by quite a bit, as much as 40%. And of course, that would set up the Iran, and then you see why they were ganging up with Israel to go and raid Iran, and then Iran played the gold card. All right, we got to continue this next time, Stacey Herbert, because we're out of frickin' time.
But remember, the point there was that the People's Bank of China will no longer be buying US Treasuries.
Stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to talk to Alasdair Macleod of goldmoney.com. Alasdair, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
It's a pleasure, Max.
All right, Alasdair, you are the man with your ear to the ground in the global gold market. Usually have some fresh story beating everybody to the punch. What is the latest kind of insider dope you're hearing in the gold market?
Well, I discovered something very interesting from the refining community in Switzerland. What they are seeing is Arab bars, 400-ounce bars, being sent to them for reprocessing into 4 nines, that's 0.9999 purity, 1 kilo bars, which are traded on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So they are moving their gold from the London standard to the new, better standard, because London bars are 995. So it is less pure than the new standard, which the Chinese use for their deliveries.
Fantastic. Okay,
yeah.
So they are now in the process of grading the standard by recasting this gold that's coming out of Switzerland and going through the Middle East.
Well, basically, what they're doing is, as I understand it, is they're sending the 400-ounce bars over, getting them reprocessed, and then taking back into their own storage these the 1 kilo bars.
What does this tell you?
Well, it's very, very interesting. One can only suppose that actually what the Arab community, and by this I mean Saudi Arabia and what I would call the playboy states around the Gulf, are looking for something which is more liquid than those 400-ounce bars.
Right.
Now, we all know that there has been a bit of a fallout between Saudi Arabia in particular and America over, first of all, Mubarak, who they didn't support, and then secondly over Syria, where the Americans backed off. And then the last straw that's broken the camel's back is the détente with Iran. So you can see that there are big political shifts going on within the Middle East.
Okay, so you're looking at this gold market as confirmation of what some are observing as a growing rift between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia that goes back to the early 1970s when the gold window was closed and you had the beginning of the petrodollar. Yep. But now that is threatened because of other activities in the Middle East, because now you've got the collapse of the Syrian invasion due to, in part, the no vote from the UK,
yep,
the House of Parliament, and this détente with Iran. So the Saudi Arabia, so you see that in the gold price. The gold, and what you're saying is that the Playboy states in the Gulf, as you described them, they want to get more liquid in gold. They're recasting this gold because they are now looking toward a post-Saudi U.S. Bilateral relationship, or a huge change in that relationship.
I'm speculating that this is the case, but this to me seems logical. If we take this a bit further, then we can get a little bit more frightened, perhaps, about the implications.
Okay, let's do it.
Because
let's go for it.
Because if they are looking to use their gold for transactions, then they are moving away from the dependence on the petrodollar. So they're becoming more Asian and less Western in that sense. Now, if the petrodollar becomes yesterday's story, then that's very, very bad for the dollar.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, whatever happens to gold, that really doesn't matter. But if they move away to an alternative means of international payment for oil, which presumably will be initially throughout Asia, which we know the Asian states, and particularly Russia and China and so on, are promoting very, very hard to get away from the dollar, then I just think that there is a risk that petrodollars will start going back to New York in pure dollar form, and we know what that does to the exchanges.
Right, so in other words, many people have talked about the fact that you don't see inflation in the U.S. because all the money printing goes exported, goes to China, it goes to the Middle East. And so that's where the inflation is. It's over, that's where the money is. It's kind of held in those bank reserves. But you're saying that this could tip and indicate a situation where that money starts coming back from being in storage, effectively, in the Middle East and China, and you have a wash of money coming back. Suddenly, oh my God, prices are doubling or tripling. You were right, Peter Schiff was right, the inflationists were right, and so this is part of that story, right?
It is, if you like, an addition to the whole story. Can I just pick you up on the inflation in America point? We are seeing lots of inflation in asset prices. What we have not seen is recorded in the official statistics inflation, if you like, on Main Street. But if you look at John Williams' shadow stats figures, which he uses the methodology pre-1980 to calculate what the inflation rate actually is in the States, he comes up with 8 or 9%.
All right, let me cut in here for a second. Can you say the same thing about the UK? Because the UK, there is no service like shadow stats. They don't calculate CPI in quite the same way. They use some different methodology, but they claim that inflation is running at roughly 2.8%, which seems similarly misstated.
Yes, I can't quite put my finger on it because I don't have a John Williams of shadow stats actually doing the grunt in terms of isolating these statistics out. But my experience, and I guess your experience, is over the last year or two, prices have gone up considerably more than the 2–2.5%, which the Bank of England tells us is the case.
You know, it's funny because in this country they talk about the cost of living going up at numbers that are bigger and higher than the inflation rate, and they don't seem to think that there's a connection between, oh, the cost of living is going up, but inflation's low. I mean, that kind of financial illiteracy coming out of the Chancellor's office and the Prime Minister's mouth is quite shocking that nobody actually calls them on that. But let's move on here for a second. The trading of gold is remarkable because at the open, they have encountered what they call stop logic events. Okay, now in my day when I was working on Wall Street, there used to be something called halt trading.
Yep.
Okay, halt trading because there's an order imbalance. And now they don't call it a halt trading anymore because that would infer an order imbalance. Now they call it stop logic, which somehow makes it sound logical. But it's just manipulation,
or
isn't it?
anti-logical, perhaps.
Well, I mean, as if there's some reason to it. This is just what this is just banging the opening with a huge order. It's just manipulation, right?
Yes, you're right. This happened twice yesterday, and I hadn't come across the term before. They now call it a stop logic. But it seems that what happens is that if somebody puts in a sell order which takes out the complete stack of bids, the market will pause until some sort of order can come back in. And the pause, I believe, is something like 20 seconds, which I suppose when you've got all this sort of algo and HFT trading and all the rest of it is actually a very long time. Anyway, some sort of semblance of balance came back into the market and it steadied for a bit. But I think what is actually remarkable about that, the whole of that episode, is that all this happened well before the FOMC minutes were released. And guess what? After they were released, they hit it again.
The Federal Open Market Committee in the U.S., which is the central bank, the Federal
Reserve.
That's
right. And furthermore, if you look at the statistics in terms of the growth in open interest, the growth in the number of shorts on COMEX, you can see that all this seems to have been planned well in advance. In other words, the fall in the prices has been, it feels as if it's almost orchestrated. But rather than, let us say, just sort of blaming everybody for insider trading and orchestration and all the rest of it, I think we have to face the fact that almost everybody I talk to in capital markets is bearish. And when I come, when I sort of dig in and say, why are you bearish? The answer always comes back. It's, it's a momentum trade. The moving averages are turning down. It's technical analysis. It's Elliott wave. Absolutely no mention at all of the underlying fundamentals, which actually show, as I illustrated with my fiat money quantity, gold is now significantly undervalued compared to where it was before the Lehman crisis. My latest calculation shows it's about 34% under where it was in real terms in the month before the Lehman crisis. So it is seriously undervalued.
In real terms, adjusted for inflation?
This is adjusted for the growth of cash money and deposits in the US banking system.
Adjusted for money supply growth?
Yeah, for fiat money growth. I call it the fiat money quantity, and that's precisely what it is.
All right, so before, just to put this in context here, so before the Lehman collapse, the price of gold, as it's relating to the overall amount of fiat money in the system, it has a certain relationship to that fiat money system.
Precisely.
Since the crisis, there's been a lot of pumping up of the money. That's American for pumping up the money. But the price in relation to that supply of money is actually 30% cheaper.
Yes, it's over 30% cheaper, 34% cheaper.
There's more fiat
as of
money
this morning.
But let me cut in for a second, because libor rate, we know, is being manipulated. Forex is being manipulated. There's now an open inquiry in the UK that's bringing in, as part of the libor rate manipulation of gold market. So, I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory, because, first of all...
it's suspected by the regulators.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy investigation.
Yes.
That's a difference between,
That's
it's
right.
no longer a theory now, it's an open investigation that they're looking into gold rigging. And of course, I don't understand why people would accept the fact that, well, LIBOR rigging is the, and Forex rigging, that's normal. But gold rigging, that's outrageous. Don't they understand that it's part and parcel the exact same thing?
It's the other end of the deal. It's as simple as that.
They're two bookends of the same program.
Exactly.
You can't, in other words, unless you manipulate gold, your Forex and LIBOR rigging won't work.
Yes, that's right. But there is even worse rigging than that, and that is the central banks. By suppressing interest rates down close to zero, they are rigging everything, all the markets, which basically are priced off interest rates.
Right, so it's not a policy, it's a market rig.
It's
not a policy.
The central banks are rigging the markets considerably more than the people they're investigating.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Here's kind of throw a cat amongst the pigeons here. There is some anecdotal evidence to suggest that money that would now be going into gold and silver on the margins is going into Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, that's gone from under $1 billion market cap to 10 billion market cap, and the Winklevoss twins in New York think it can get it to a $400 billion market cap. Is your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I know nothing about Bitcoin, but what I would say is that the market is far smaller than the gold market. The gold market is huge. I calculate that China, in this year so far, has imported 2,000 tons of gold. Now, that's over double what the World Gold Council estimates show. So in that context, Bitcoin is a flea on the backside of the donkey. I mean, it's really very, very small. That's about all I know about it. So the idea that...
Fair enough. The market cap, although quite large relative to where it was a year ago, is still not at the point where you can make the statement with a high degree of credibility that the gold market's being impacted yet. Okay, I accept that. I accept your point there. Let's talk about silver. In the U.S., both ETF holdings and U.S. mint sales are at record highs. Now, a lot of people wouldn't know that to be the story given the current price. Imports to India are booming, so demand has never been higher. What's going on?
I think it's one of those unintended consequences, isn't it? I mean, if we just turn to India for a moment, they have severely restricted official gold imports. Now, two things have happened. Firstly, the premium has shot up, which basically is the arbitrage for the smugglers. So we know that lots of gold is still getting in. So it hasn't actually. It just
what's the premium on silver in India right now?
I don't know what the premium is.
The gold got up to like 20% recently.
Absolutely. I mean, what people are doing is where they can't get hold of gold, they're turning to silver, and the result is that the silver imports into India are absolutely enormous.
All right, we've got to cut it off there. We've got to cut it off there. We're out of time. Alasdair Macleod, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
That's my pleasure. Thank you, Max.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Alasdair Macleod of goldmoney.com. If you'd like to get in touch, please tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.